believe that as soon as you write out a will, you will die the next day. So they have not yet, they're still alive, so it's good for them. However, we don't know their plans, they won't tell us. And that's difficult to do, because if they run into a situation where now we are their caregivers, we don't really know what their plans were. So what we did was inside this folder is in the back of it we have caregiver resources. This is what you want to do. This is how we plan. Is we have all these different resources, including a board with a panel right here that talks about, okay, so we're all going to go through aging, we're all going to die. That in taxes, as we know, the pure known things in our lifetime. And so these are things we want to look at now. When I was growing up, my parents would take us after Mass, we would go to give out communion. And so we would give out communion first at the nursing home. And so we saw how their lives were. As little kids, we were 5, 6, 7 years old, and we learned as to what it was to live in a nursing home. We saw what it was. They were thrilled to see young kids. They were thrilled to be among little ones rather than people their own ages all the time. However, it was also good for them to see, to be amongst each other. They lived in their generation, and they all relaxed in their generation together. Then after that, we would go over to a home, individual's home, and the son and daughter were there taking care of the mother. And while she was happy to be in the house with her children, taking care of her, and had her grandchildren there in front of her as well, the caretakers, the son and daughter-in-law, were thrilled when we came because they got out of Dodge. It was time to go. They needed a break. And so this is as much about the actual person who needs the care as well as it is about the caregiver themselves. And so those are choices that you will make. Every one of us here in this room, we get to choose first and foremost, where do we want to live? Do we want to choose an assisted living facility type of situation, or do we want to stay at home? In fact, this is where Jen comes in very powerfully. If you choose to live at home, we want to make sure that you have all the care that you need and can afford that level of care, and those are the sorts of things that we do. I mentioned here one of the first things is Partners in Care. This is an ability to stay in your home, and that's the whole organization's purpose. And so that's another example. I'm on the board of Partners in Care, and an excellent pay-it-forward type of situation where, well, we're young and healthy. We go and we bring in medicines or take people to doctor appointments, things of that nature, and then you get an hour of credit for having done so. And then when you need that level of care, you call Partners in Care, they come to you, and that hour of care is taken care of. And so those are examples of, I want to stay in my home, that's my decision, and this is the way that I can take care of myself. The Department of Aging has a lot of excellent resources as well for that, and that's why I put them in here. In fact, I put one out here, I Love Caregivers. This just came today. There's a seminar put on by the Department of Aging Tuesday, November 18th, and it's all about Department of Aging staying in your home versus assisted living, and it's one of those things that you, as either a person who needs the care or your caregiver, you need to know about the different choices that you have. One of my favorite websites, by the way, if you've lived in Maryland, you've loved it, but you're thinking about perhaps other places to retire to, highly recommend retirementliving.com. One of the things it does that I love is it will rate the health care of the different places you're going to. It could be Florida, it could be South Carolina, Texas, wherever. It'll tell you state by state, well, what is the tax and health care situation of the place where I'm going to? What about cost of living? Again, it's all about what can I afford to afford in my life going forward, and what are the resources I can utilize. What's it going to cost to me to live the life that I choose for the rest of my life, and do I have the resources to do that? Of course, then it gets into as well Social Security. There's a lot of different choices with regard to Social Security. If you haven't already taken Social Security and you don't know the different options, I highly recommend that you work with the local Social Security office, either up in Glen Burnie or down here in Annapolis, It is not like the DMV anymore. There happen to be a very educated and very good crowd down there to walk you through the process. And so particularly if you're a couple, just as an example, you may want to, think you should, go ahead and each pick up Social Security at age 62 because it's going to go away. There might be movements of limitation of how much you earn, particularly or get as a Social Security benefit in the future. I would say by 2017 there'll be a lot of movements to reduce the amount of Social Security that you receive, but only if you make, as a married couple, over $170,000 of adjusted gross income. There aren't too many couples right now in retirement that are making over $170,000 of income, $85,000 if you're a single individual. So there is a loophole right now that exists that says that first of you to receive Social Security does so at age 66. The second of the spouses to receive Social Security can defer their own Social Security benefit, pick up half of the first spouse's benefit at no detriment to the first one, and then at age 70 they would get 132% of their benefit. That's a loophole that exists. Seems like a bill for a long time, and that, for your future, as long as you plan to live past age 78, I will tell you that is the smarter move to make as a couple, because you will get quite a bit of a benefit versus if you had each taken your own age 62 benefit. There's even a calculator at SSA.gov that will tell you, okay, it's better for us to do this versus thinking of it at age 62, for example. Again, this is all about how am I going to afford the choices that I want to make in retirement or that my parents will need to make for me to take care of them. I'm not going to get too deep into Medicare and Medicaid other than to say for Medicare, a similar type of thing that already exists. If you make over $170,000, you're paying more than $104.90 for Medicare Part B. And so that's a good thing for you to notice is that if you make more than $170, you're going to pay $146 per month for your Medicare Part B. There's a lot of little tax tricks that you can do to avoid being in that range for your finances. I'll also tell you as a little side note, they're going to keep that. If anyone's receiving Medicare Part B, it's going to be $104.90 again next year. So yay for us, no increase in your Medicare B cost. In fact, that's the same for Medicare D. With regard to group health care and long-term disability, one of the biggest things I always find with people is that, let's just say that you're caring for mom or dad, and they've been paying for an individual plan that's very expensive, and you're saying, well, how are they going to afford that, or even you yourselves? If mom or dad happen to be getting a pension, check to see with that company as to whether or not they're eligible for retiree health care. Which is going to be way less expensive than their individual plan. I'll give you an example. I had a client who was Union Carbide, received a very minimal pension. I don't know, call it $1.50 a day, but that was the point. Union Carbide was brought on by Dow. Dow Chemical provided a retiree health benefit for all retirees who were eligible. If you received a pension, you get retiree health care. So we called up, and sure enough, that individual who was paying for very, very high, we call it $900 a month type of health care, we were able to get it to $235. Only because we found out, oh, well, if you're receiving a pension, that company is probably also going to give you retiree health care at a much reduced price. So those sorts of things are extremely important to check out. Same thing with long-term disability, just check to see as to whether that was something that is eligible and you may not have applied for. We get that situation often. If it's a group policy type of situation and they're left due to disability, you go back to them, it's not too late, to find out whether or not they were eligible for that disability and it's a back pay situation. So that's for disability. Getting into long-term care, the fun one. The long-term care is a tough one because at present, the former long-term care policies, and I'm talking about nursing care at this stage, ran through a very difficult time in the last few years because of the interest rates. A lot of the policies were written, and they were written when interest rates were at 7%, and no one ever expected the interest rates to fall to 4%. And how about even below 4%, now at 1%? Well, what happened was a lot of the companies had to walk away from their policies because of the fact that it was too expensive for them to keep those policies. If you have an existing policy, let's say John Hancock MedLife Genworth, just check on it. Each year, there's the possibility that you'll get a 20% increase in the premium. Check to see the policies. There's some good ones out there that are being very good about not raising their rates so far. But that's another good thing to find out, because it may become prohibitively expensive for you to hold on to that benefit. At the same time, I certainly wouldn't tell you to get rid of that policy, because you've already put so much into the policy perhaps that it's just something you'd want to check out and make sure that it is still worthwhile for you, that same policy that you picked up. Oftentimes they start now to reduce the benefit that you signed up for in order to keep that policy premium the same. So if you're thinking about a long-term care policy, there's certain ones out there. Some of them are okay. Many of them are a little bit on the expensive side. They try to sell you life insurance as a rider to a long-term care policy or in addition to it. If you don't have any financial dependents, there's a really good chance that you don't need life insurance as well as long-term care. You came to buy long-term care, try to make sure that the benefit is exactly what you need, not some ancillary benefit that you don't want and may cause a tax problem for your family. If you have an existing life insurance policy, there's something to keep in mind. So if this is a whole life policy, so the family, let's say mom or dad had a whole life policy, there's a chance that that policy can be converted over to a long-term care policy. Well, we determined that mom and dad don't need life insurance anymore, but they sure could use long-term care. So you'll call up the company and you'll say to them, what's the chance that we can convert this, and what does it look like to have that long-term care policy? Again, yes, you will lose the life insurance benefit, but it's really the care during their lifetime that we care about, and that's really what we're going after. Put a star next to home equity line of credit for me. This is probably one of the most important pieces that you need, and I'm going to bring up a couple others as well. A home equity line of credit is an excellent secondary emergency fund. In fact, the other piece of paper that I put in the back shows a chart. It's a pyramid. At the very bottom it says, if you don't have an emergency fund, which is 6 months living expenses, and a home equity line of credit, go get yourself one right now. That's really what you want to do. That's the base of all of your planning in order to meet expenses. So that think of last week. If you had an emergency situation of a very high expense and you happen to have all your money sitting in the stock market last week, you would have had to sell out last week at a very dramatic drop. Just wait till this week. In fact, we're right almost back to where we were a week and a half ago. A home equity line of credit will allow you to say, well, then I'll write a check from my line of credit, again, only for emergencies. And then when the market gets back up to a good number where I'm not losing money, I sell those stocks and I put the money back and I pay my line of credit back to the zero number so that I can have that money again for emergencies. So everybody should make sure that they have a home equity line of credit if available to them. The best thing to do is if you check with your checking account. Some of the locals around here have teaser rates for you. NFCU, I'm going to put a plug in for them. They have an excellent, if you're eligible for your NFCU, very low cost. TD Bank is also another good one here in Arnold and right down the street on Bestgate. Excellent places to look for a home equity line of credit. What's a good number? A $100,000 line of credit. If you have that amount available in your home equity, that's what you're looking for. Should be no cost to it. Yes, it's a variable rate loan, so that means when interest rates start to rise, which we expect they will, if you have to borrow from it at that point, then you will borrow at a higher interest rate. But you don't pay any money on it until you have to borrow money from it. So unlike a home loan, that's A, fixed, B, you start paying the interest on it right away. The line of credit says, I don't pay a dime on it until I actually pay or use it, and that's important. Again, I want to make sure that we have it available for emergencies, and that's why we have it. I also want to say, it's not on here, but you can write the word umbrella down. Last night I was over talking with an Alzheimer's group, caregivers for Alzheimer's, those with Alzheimer's. I also have several clients who are dealing with dementia issues. And so one of the first things we said to the group was, make sure that you have a valid umbrella liability policy, because someone with dementia doesn't know when it's time to stop driving. And the last thing you want to find out is that they caused an accident and you have assets that are exposed to creditors, to where the attorney who represents the other individual will come after your assets or your parents' assets, the person with that. Extremely important. An umbrella liability policy for $1 million sounds like extremely expensive. However, it's about $150 to $200 a year. In fact, most times I look at what your homeowners and auto deductibles are. We raise them a little bit, and now you don't pay anything for your umbrella liability policy. So, Star umbrella liability policy, that's a huge deal. So, again, and where you get that umbrella, by the way, is from your property and casualty companies, State Farm, although bear with me, State Farm just announced they may not be writing new umbrella policies. If you're fortunate to have USAA, fantastic, they're the best of the best in the area. Erie is also very, very good as a local company. State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, they're under the hurricane umbrella, and so they tend to have difficult ones, we'll say. But anyway, we can talk more about that. And then finally, if you provided, here's some tax considerations. If you are a caregiver and you provide more than 50% support to an individual in your home, could be mother, brother, sister, whomever, then you can declare them as a dependent of yours, again, providing more than 50% support for them. Upon doing so, that's a credit to you. As you can see, it's a $3,950 credit for 2014. That's and plus also you get some additional itemized deductions off. And so that's a good thing to keep in mind. You work with your tax advisor to find out all the things you can do because you're a dependent caregiver. Also gifting. If they're not considered a dependent, then you can gift things to them. Well, we also always do, and thankfully this week we can now say again, we might have highly appreciated securities. That was a thing that did not exist last week. If you have any stocks in the market, is that you would gift your highly appreciated securities, because you're in a higher tax bracket probably, to somebody who's in a lower tax bracket. If they're in the 15% tax bracket, from a tax perspective, they pay no capital gains. You would pay 15 to 25% capital gains. And so that's just a smart move to make sure that you keep the family finances as much as possible. If your dependent is financially dependent upon you solely, I'd really have you consider a second to 9 life insurance policy. Why not buy 2 separate individual policies, one for husband, one for wife? Because it's really all about that. Once the second of you dies, who's going to provide dependent care for and finances for that individual, be it a mother, brother, sister, and more importantly, one of your children that happens to be dependent beyond their age 26 and so on. And so that's an important piece as well to have. We want to make sure that at my death and at the death of my spouse, I'm going to have assets to take care of that person who is relying upon me financially for the rest of their lives. That's a big deal. And then make sure to update your estate. I have to say that I've already seen the Comfort and Consolation document. We did one back in May of Holy Family, excuse me. And they have the document there. It's fantastic. My only question to here is the document on in joyfulbook.org? Is it a copy of it there?
It will be. The old one is now linked to it, but the new one will be.
Wonderful.
It will also be online at the Maryland Catholic Conference.
Okay, perfect. Very good. Thank you. I'm sorry. And so yes, by all means, check that out. And then lastly, I will say very quickly, is to care for yourself if you're a dependent caregiver. That's very important. Is, as I said in that one where the husband and wife ran out the minute that we showed up with communion, it's because you're going to need that time. It's stressful, very stressful. So please, by all means, take time for yourselves. Thank you very much.